Find a good spot. Um, Hello, welcome. We are here. It is now. In case you didn't know, November is National Adoption Month. And yesterday, November 17th, was National Adoption Day, when hundreds of kids around the country finalized with their forever families legally. Today and this month's theme being gratitude, I want to explore gratitude through the lens of adoption and foster care. For those of you who know me, this is 90% of what I like to talk about anyway. So yeah, here we go. I also want to, I enjoy talking about this, and this is meaningful to me because I am adopted. I work with adopted kids, and we have a number of people in this community who are adoptive parents, who are foster parents, and who may be adopted, I don't know. And to those people, I just want to extend thank you for what you are doing and aspiring to do. I've tried to write about this maybe 3 or 4 times. I think I got 3 or 4 different sermons out, and I find it very difficult to articulate because it is so personal to me, and because I think through lived experience and reflection, it's a really both beautiful and brutal picture of what a relationship with God is like individually and corporately in community. I think it reflects some of the best of humanity and also some of the worst. And if you are involved in this system, or this has been your experience anyway, I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think that foster care and adoption is a reflection, a really good, clear reflection just of what life is like and about. It's a magnifying glass for us as individuals and communities. We choose to love other people, and we choose to be with them in their hard feelings, their big behaviors. And I think that choice is what makes it beautiful. And I can say personally that having people who stick around and choose to do that, respect choices, and do everything, and having parents who do everything they can to let us be our most authentic selves, gives us a very powerful understanding of how to be in the world and what it's like to be in the world. It's messy. Adoption and foster care hit at childhood and family, 2 of the most complicated and messy institutions or life experiences that we have. We're all coming up on big holidays where some of us might rejoice to be with family, and some of us are counting down till we can get out of there, right? I think that we have actively ignored some of the mess in order to paint an easier, more comfortable picture of relationships. And I think that mirrors gratitude. A lot of times we think gratitude is not supposed to be messy. It's supposed to be an uncomplicated emotion that in the morning we sit down and are grateful, and we know we don't drink coffee, we drink tea or artisan coffee and are grateful. And in the evening, when we have enough energy left over, we sit and reflect and are grateful. And I think that's kind of when we hear the word gratitude, those are the associations, those are the connotations that we pick up. It is also a very easy prescription to make to other people. I don't know how many of us have heard, you should be grateful for blank. This is one of the most common things that adopted and foster kids hear is, you should be grateful. Please don't say that. I think gratitude is really, really difficult. And when we are able to be truly grateful, it is well earned. We have earned that gratitude. I also agree with Nathan when he says Reverend Nathan Roswag when he says, yeah, you got there, yeah. When he says gratitude is magic, but I think that that magic is earned. So I think that going back to my gratitude for parents who are with me in my big behaviors and my big feelings, I think that is a common experience of not just adoptive and foster parents, but many parents, right? The big emotions, the strong reactions that children have. I think it is a beautiful picture of God's love when we are willing to be with someone and hold them in that and not make them put it away or reduce it. When working with foster and adoptive families, I often tell them that all problems for these kids, and I wonder maybe most kids, are existential. All relationships are fraught. All emotions are huge. These kids have grown up in a stranger's house and have a hard time believing that anyone really wants to care about what they feel or think or do, or that anyone will be around long enough because it is their lived experience that people are not around all the time. But really, I think this is just a human norm. Most of our emotions are really big ones. Most of our fears are existential. Most relationships are scary. I don't think anyone has ever worried about something that isn't important. Life is difficult and intimidating, and many children, like many adults, are afraid of not being seen or heard for who they authentically and truly are. This is, again, a human problem. Who do we trust? How do we trust? What do we do with all this? How do we handle stress? We can see this in the tantrums, in the meltdowns, the difficulty expressing themselves, myself, explosive reactions to seemingly minor provocations and irritations. I have I have worked through a lot of this myself. Also a lot of internalizing behaviors, not just tantrums and meltdowns, but anxiety, self-loathing, reducing yourself, making yourself small, not having your own needs. The list goes on. Adoptive and foster children are more at risk for high-risk behaviors, suicidal ideation, and sexualized behaviors. In reality, foster and adoptive kids, as well as all kids, are terrified, scared, confused, angry, and feel alone, even if they are not truly alone. They feel those things acutely and deeply. Just like most kids, they don't have a lot of agency in their own lives. And I wonder how many of us as adults do not feel a lot of agency in our own lives. What we see in these kids and in these families is a deep protection over the agency they think we have. I think we all experience that in our own lives, in our own churches. Making sure the boards are in the right order. Everyone sits in the right seats. The things are done just so. I think these are normal human behaviors. And I also believe that this is where the good news is. If we're viewing our humanity and our relationship with God through this lens, God can deal with these behaviors just like our parents can deal with behaviors. I also wonder what it is like to have to parent the entire human race, right? What a mystery that must be, as it is difficult to parent, period. In the Bible, I did a rough count, and I found, this is my reading of it, Moses was adopted, Esther was adopted, David was sort of adopted. I think in Pennsylvania, what we'd call what happened to David, subsidized permanent legal custodianship. So David was SPLC'd, and his parents could return to the court system to appeal that decision in the future should they wish to. Onesimus in the New Testament was adopted. Ruth was sort of adopted. Timothy was also SPLC'd. God places a great deal of emphasis on the choices we make and the quality of our relationships, not the circumstances of your birth or the circumstances of your family. For a significant period of Israel's history, God chose to use this spiritual adoption to appoint judges. God did not create a line of succession. You can read about that in, Kings, Chronicles, and Samuel, what happened when God created a line of succession. God chose people paying no mind to their circumstances. In fact, many of God's chosen prophets exhibited symptoms of the same big behaviors we see in foster and adopted children. Jael was adopted to be a prophet by God and stabbed King Sisera in the head with a tent peg. Samson was adopted to be a prophet by God and was a hot mess. No impulse control, no executive functioning. Gideon was adopted to be a prophet and did not believe God, right? Samuel was adopted to be a prophet, also SPLC'd, and also did not listen the first time God called. Paul writes about adoption a bunch in the New Testament, and there is so much content online about this. There are just so many blogs about it. It is such a theme in the New Testament, and it is not something that I have heard discussed a great deal in my lifetime. And I think what Paul is trying to communicate is that we are adopted not because of anything, not because of where someone was born, not the circumstances or situation, but because we are us, with our big behaviors, big feelings, and everything else. Paul uses adoption as a metaphor as to how God treats us, selected into God's family regardless of circumstance, and that gives us a picture of what God's love is like. And for all the behaviors, all the emotions, all the struggle and the hurt that we experience, we are still adopted. That is final, period. I think what Paul leaves out is the toll that it takes to parent and be with someone who on a very deep level feels like they don't belong or struggles with feeling like they fit in. It is difficult to hold all of those big feelings when a child experiences them. Is it difficult to be with them in the tantrum and not tantrum ourselves? It is difficult to not melt down ourselves. It is difficult to continue to fight the battles over chicken nuggets and TikTok. Making these choices, choosing to continue to do this hurts. It takes a toll. One of the things that we have about as much scientific evidence as anything else we have is that children begin forming their understanding of the world while they are still in utero. And in the first 3 years of life, neural connections are being made at the rate of about 1 million per minute. I can cite my sources if you like. That sounds crazy. I'm happy to cite my sources. This is when children develop an unconscious understanding of the world. It's how they learn whether or not the world is a safe and welcoming place for them and how to react to the world around them. This is when they learn whether or not people will respond to them if they vocalize their needs. So many children whose first 90 days outside the womb experience not the loving arms of a parent, but perhaps the loving arms of a stranger or no one at all. They are left without the care and nurture that they desperately need. This is a defining experience for so many adoptive kids, and I wonder again, how many of us have experienced something similar in our own lives and how we responded to that? They experience themselves as torn apart from the comfort and security of the only existence they have ever known to that point. It is scary and terrifying. Looking at the importance of nurture, look at the importance of connection, looking at the importance of attachment, I think covers so many metaphors that we are really If we are very churched people, we are used to hearing about God, the necessity of being held close. God holds us close. The importance of comfort and familiarity, the necessity of being heard and seen for who you are, being a child of God, the importance of parental involvement in our big behaviors in times of perceived crisis. When babies have a crisis, they cannot help themselves. They need a child, they need a parent, they need a caregiver, they need an adult, in the same way that we need God. We cannot help ourselves often. We need something bigger than us to hold down our big feelings and monitor our big behaviors. We need someone to help us calm down or inspire us to get up when we are depressed. Like I said, what happens to that baby when the parent is a stranger? When the baby has to spend its most vulnerable and informative months and years meeting an entirely new person with absolutely no agency to impact the relationship? What happens when the baby has to grow up and finds itself as an adult having to raise a child? What happens when we feel this way about our relationship with God? That we have grown up in a stranger's house, doing everything we can to feel love, acceptance, and belonging. Dr. Gabor Mate says that authenticity and attachment are the two most important things for an infant, and that attachment wins out if the baby has to make a choice. Our desire to be connected to other people, to feel safe, to know that someone's watching out, at the loss of our authentic self-expression. And I wonder how many of us have experienced that in our lives. This creates a huge need for safe adults such as yourselves, communities such as ours, who can regulate themselves through the big feelings and have access to others who can support them as they support their children. It is important I cannot overemphasize the importance of community and everyone holding everyone else in our big feelings. I think based on the information I have just provided and the framework I have just given you, it's easy to create a simple narrative and blame birth parents for the trauma their children face. Please do not do this if you ever encounter a foster or adopted person. Please don't. It is a reductive and it is harmful to children and parents. The American child welfare system is a historically oppressive system. It disproportionately impacts Black kids and families, as well as poor kids and families. Many parents have their children removed simply because they cannot find a job. They do not have stable housing. It has nothing to do with the love and attunement and attachment between them and their children, but whether or not they have the material things they need. Many parents do not receive support to maintain supportive and safe environments, as they have never had a supportive and safe environment. This is a generational concern. Many parents who have their children removed from their homes are survivors of childhood trauma themselves and have not been able to heal from the wounds they incurred. Hurt people hurt people. Also, the United States government has stolen several generations of children from indigenous and international communities to such a degree that there has to be federal legislation passed called the Indian Child Welfare Act in 1978 that requires indigenous children to stay in their indigenous communities, if at all possible. The constitutionality of, it's called ICWA, was upheld recently by the Supreme Court when a Christian family tried to overturn it. There have also been numerous international organizations who ignored the consent and welfare of international adoptees. I know this because I have heard the story. This is not speculation. Children have asked not to be adopted and are sent to the United States anyway. We Christians have decided that it is more important that children be raised in Christian America than in their country and culture of origin. There is a narrative in which these birth parents are monsters and that children are victims. It is easy to fall into the trap that the American church has fallen into for centuries and demand that adopted people and people in foster care are just gracious about their setting and should be content with where things stand. I will admit, in preparation for this sermon, I learned about a new trigger phrase. I have. A family I work with referred to other kids and real kids, right? Other kids and real kids. It hurts for anyone who has experienced any sort of separation from a parent, emotional, physical, whatever, to be called not real. Myself and other adoptees, particularly transracial adoptees and international adoptees, or adoptees with ostensibly difficult birth parents, are told we should be grateful to be plucked up from our birth parents. We should be grateful that our parents had us at all. We should be grateful that we were allowed to grow up in such lavish circumstances. We should be grateful that someone took pity on us. We should be grateful that someone let us be a part of their family. We should be grateful to live in America. We should be grateful to go to good schools. Each person has their own story, and the attempt to blur the complexity and mask the colonizing practices the Christian church and other institutions have practiced for so long is wrong. Everyone gets to have their own story. It is not for you or I to tell or assume what anyone should or should not be grateful for. Adoption and foster care exposes the harm that telling cheap and easy stories does to individuals and to communities. So, it's a lot of negative. Where does this leave us? I'm supposed to be talking about gratitude. We know that adoption and foster care is a mirror that God holds up to show how we love one another by choosing one another, and that our individual circumstances matter far less than the choices we make, that we should never judge based on status, heritage, or aesthetics. The people who God chose to teach us do not have anything special or unique to claim about themselves based on the cultural milieu of the day. There are no real kids and not real kids for God. Everyone belongs and gets a chance. Everyone's experience matters. It is also hard to be a community in which everyone can experience belonging. It is exhausting and it is draining. It is scary, and there will be no linear, clear path forward. Moments of present awareness, grace, responsibility, accountability, and love shape our individual and collective healing. The difficulties that one person faces are tied up in the difficulties that we all face. To see anyone's struggles as separate from our own could be harmful. To not set boundaries and create structure and responsibility and accountability, as well as grace, love, nurture, and compassion, hurts us all, especially the most vulnerable. We cannot choose to tell other people's stories in a way that makes us comfortable. What my experience is and what your experience is may be different, and to assume a simple narrative is harmful to both of us. Each person's story is impacted by so many things, both interpersonal, institutional, but I shouldn't say both because there's three things. Each person's story is impacted by many things, interpersonal, institutional, and historical, that we have no knowledge of, and we should try to be as gracious and gentle with each other as we can. This is why I think being grateful is a hard-won skill in times of scarcity and stress, and that being grateful is something that is all around us all the time. Gratitude exists wherever we find ourselves. It may be in times of health and healing and wholeness, and it may be in times of brokenness and despair. But all of those times are woven into the blanket that God uses us to hold us close, comfort us, and nurture us. All of our experience matters in different places, spaces, times, and communities. Just as it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to hold our own experiences and pain together. We all need each other, no matter the circumstances. Amen.